You're listening to CoachingCues podcast, where experts all around the world answer your most burning questions surrounding the wide topic of strength training. Every week we tackle the what, the why, and the how of one specific topic in just 15 minutes. Straight to the point, no fluff. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this week's episode.
Hello everyone, my name is Christopher Tabor. I'm an assistant professor and the graduate program director at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. My research focuses on strength and power development, periodization, sports science, and weightlifting. In addition to my roles at Sacred Heart, I also serve as a weightlifting coach with the East Coast Gold weightlifting team, and I run a club based out of Connecticut. So today, I was asked to discuss the question, does muscle hypertrophy contribute to strength gains? This is not a new question. It's been debated for a long time, and they were trying to determine if this relationship is a positive, if hypertrophy is actually beneficial, and how it contributes to strength. Recently, it's become a contentious topic, and there are various groups coming out in support or against the theory that muscle hypertrophy contributes to strength. Now, this topic's being debated mainly because there are instances when you can get stronger in the absence of muscle gain, and then there are other times when you can increase the size of the muscle without a corresponding increase in strength. So when we break this down and we're trying to determine if there is a causal relationship, there are some indications that hypertrophy may not be sufficient for development of strength, and there are sometimes when it may not be necessary. However, there is likely a contributory relationship between these items, where as we see muscle size increase, we tend to see increases in strength as well. So what we're going to do is discuss this relationship between muscle size and then muscle strength and why there is a contribution from size to strength. So to begin, we need to discuss the underlying physiology underpinning hypertrophy and why it might contribute to strength gains. So first, I'd like to pull a definition for a specific type of hypertrophy from an excellent paper from Dr. Cody Hahn. So what we're going to limit our discussion to today is myofibrillar hypertrophy. And this is defined as an increase in the size and or number of myofibrils accompanied by an increase in sarcomere or sarcomeric protein abundance directly related to the structure or contractile force generation of the sarcomere. So this provides a great definition because it separates out myofibrillar hypertrophy from connective tissue hypertrophy and sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Both of these have the ability to contribute to muscle size, but they may not aid in the generation of force because they are the other items surrounding the actual force generating components of the muscle. So now that we have this definition, we're going to focus for the rest of the discussion on myofibrillar hypertrophy, and this will become important later. So we know from many mechanical studies and some of the formative studies in our field that the force generating capabilities of a given muscle is the interplay and the interaction between actin and myosin during cross bridge formation and then ultimately the power stroke. This is what allows us to produce human movement and how we produce strength. Now, the more strongly bound cross bridges that you have at any given time will allow for greater force production. And what we find is that from multiple studies in animals and humans, cross-sectional area, or the whole volume of the muscle, is highly related to force production. We have some better indications from animal studies because we can extract a whole muscle and test them, and we have more limited evidence from humans. Now, the reason that cross-sectional area is highly related to force production is that a larger muscle generally will have more sarcomeres and a greater opportunity for actin-myosin cross-bridge formation. If we can get more strongly bound cross bridges, then we can get greater force generation. So if we add more sarcomeres into an existing muscle, we now have a potential for greater amounts of cross-bridge formation and ultimately force production. So with this in mind, this would be the basic mechanical underpinnings explaining why hypertrophy may have a contributory effect on strength and force production. However, there are times when you can make a muscle larger and it doesn't directly translate to strength. And this relates back earlier to when we discussed sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. This is the growth of non-contractile machinery around the fibers. Or it might be related to the inability to transfer the new muscle that you've built into a given skill or movement. There may be a lag time where the subject needs to learn how to use their newly built muscle and integrate it into the skill or movement patterns that they're performing. Secondly, there might be instances where we can get stronger without an appreciable amount of muscle gain. This is the case for many athletes who compete in weight class-based sports, and this can mainly be attributed to neural adaptations, skill acquisition, and the use of low volumes of work that are not targeted for increases in size, but actually the development of high rates of force development and high rates of power output at certain times of the year. Due to these reasons, we wouldn't expect a lot of muscle size changes because that's not the purpose of those points in time in training. Now, when we start to look into the literature, initial discrepancies that we find in the contributions and the relationship between size and strength, they are likely confounded by the quick pace of skill acquisition and neural adaptations. Specifically, you get better at lifting because you become more efficient in your motor patterns, and your neural adaptations happen rapidly at the beginning of a training plan. To make things a little bit worse, most studies in the literature are short duration in nature, and they may not capture the influence of hypertrophy because it has a longer time course. It takes several weeks to months to get appreciable hypertrophy, and due to the short duration nature of a lot of studies, we may not capture the full picture. Now, if we look at a snapshot or a cross-sectional view of subjects initially when they're not trained or at baseline, the correlation between hypertrophy and strength is very low, anywhere from about 2 to 25%. However, if the subjects continue to train and you become more well-trained and your training age increases, we start to see that the relationship between hypertrophy and strength grows and grows, and it might account for 45 to 75% in well-trained athletes, but it's highly dependent on the population. If we look at one specific subpopulation of athletes, which are strength and power athletes, we do find that one large discriminating factor between high and low performers at the same level is their lean body mass, and specifically the cross-sectional area of their most active muscles used in sport. Now, correlational studies don't necessarily say that if we have a muscle change in size that the strength increases, but what we can say is that athletes that possess larger muscles tend to perform better, and we can extrapolate out that there is a relationship between the size and the strength. So as we move back to the question, does hypertrophy contribute to strength? Yes, there appears to be at the fiber level a contribution of size and strength, and we can look at this when we look at total muscle cross-sectional area and the amount of force that can be produced. And we have some literature pointing to that the contributions of size and strength in the very beginning are low in untrained subjects at baseline, but this contribution grows larger as subjects become more well-trained. Now, in order to fully break this question out and answer it, we're going to need some well-designed studies. We would need studies that are going to look at a more within subject examination, taking initial measurements in the beginning, tracking them over time, and then taking post measurements. while using the gold standard methods for the analysis of hypertrophy that are low in error and high in reproducibility. Then we may also want to design studies that can account for other factors that confound this relationship. Those such as skill acquisition, running multiple types of tests that will gather information on size and strength. And then we also need to account for neural adaptations. So over time, as more studies come out, if we can design them in such a way, we can provide additional literature that may confirm the hypothesis that size and strength are related, and there is a contributory effect of muscle hypertrophy to size. So for now, we can point to these basic studies and specifically the mechanical underpinnings and say, yes, there is a contributory effect of hypertrophy to strength, but we need additional studies to provide a more robust picture of the exact amount of hypertrophy's effects on strength, and then longer term studies to see how this relationship changes over time with all other factors held constant. I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to discuss this question, and if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me via email at taborc@sacredheart.edu. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to CoachingCues podcast. If you would like your question to be answered by an expert, please head to coachingcues.org/ask. See you next week.